our wonderful LinkedIn community. Hope everyone's week is fantastic. It's Thirsty Thursday. Maybe you go hit some golf balls or maybe go get a drink after work or hang out with the fam. Hope everyone's day is going wonderful. We have a wonderful LinkedIn Live scheduled for today. Actually, it was scheduled for yesterday, but better late than never, right?
Right.
We had some technical difficulties on my end. I know a whole lot about finances. I know a whole lot about theology. I don't know anything about technology. So that was why we didn't do it yesterday. But as they say, better late than never, right? So today, on Family Focused Financial Planning, we're going to be talking with my good friend, Teresa Jepsen. How are you, Teresa?
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me, Keith.
Oh, yeah, this is great. You know, Teresa is a senior placement specialist. And so today we're going to be talking about ways to make it a little bit less volatile and turbulent, putting your older, your grandmother or your parent or a grandparent or a loved one in senior care. And this is a big issue in the financial planning world because it's pretty darn expensive. You know, depending on the part of the country you're in, that's going to really dictate the cost. But I've seen costs as high as $15,000 a month here in Southern California. And so this is something that requires a lot of attention. It's also quite emotionally draining for everyone involved, especially it could especially be very volatile and emotional for the person being placed in care.
Yes.
I remember my great grandmother, 10 years, well, more than 10 years ago at this point, she had advanced dementia. So it wasn't quite as emotional for her, but it was definitely emotional for the family. She had been living with my parents, and many of you here on LinkedIn probably have experience with a parent or a grandparent going into senior care. And this is becoming more and more prevalent, more and more necessary. And it's going to just continue to increase in terms of its cost, in terms of people needing care. So this is a really, really important discussion that we really need to think closely about. And I hope that what we can get out of today's LinkedIn Live is just a few things that for us to remember or to learn about how to place someone in senior care and some of the things that you might want to consider when that time comes.
Yes.
Today, there are currently over 65,000 regulated long-term care facilities in the U.S., and it's been reported by Genworth, which is an insurance company, that 70% of seniors will need some type of long-term care. And what we're finding is that women generally spend a little bit more than 3.5 years in long-term care, whereas men spend a little less than 2.5 years. And when we talk about senior care and long-term care, we talk about things like activities of daily living. And to get a benefit from, say, a long-term care policy, which we will talk about here later, you need to be unable to perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living in order to qualify for a benefit. Just to give you an idea of those activities of daily living, 64% of assisted living residents need help bathing, 57% need help walking, 48% need help dressing, 40% need help going to the bathroom, 29% need help in their bed transfer, getting in and out of bed, and 19% need help eating. So if you're unable to perform 2 of those activities of daily living, you would be able to qualify for a benefit for a long-term care policy if you have one beforehand. So Teresa, I'm really excited to have you here with us. Could you just tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you. Yes, so my background is in gerontology. That's what my master's degree is in. I've worked in that field as far back as I have come out of college. It was my first job in a long-term care for senior citizens. And I had a wonderful mentor who was my boss, who encouraged me to.
With over 8
I have
million
a
broadcasts
commercial
and over
breaking in
600
there.
million viewers engaged monthly, Restream is
Okay, not sure what that was. We got a commercial there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. I don't know what that was.
Okay, no worries. So I
is the #1 tool.
oh, there it goes again. Okay. We're good?
I don't know.
Okay, no problem.
I yeah. Let's
I've
hold on.
It's just fine. I've spent my career in gerontology. I used to own a care
We're
home.
not streaming right now.
We're not streaming?
No.
Oh, shoot. Hmm.
Increase your live audience organically. Restream enables you to create, analyze, and share your high-quality streams to over 30 different social networks at once. In this video, we'll go over all the different parts of Restream.
Okay, go ahead.
No problem. I've spent my career in gerontology. It's been about 30 years now. Believe it or not, it's been a while. I used to own a care home, sold that, did about 10 years of helping administrators of boarding cares, open care homes, do mock site surveys, respond to plans of correction, deficiencies. I trained their staff. And about 16 years ago, I had a friend in the industry who suggested that I do a placement referral company. At the time, it was brand new. Almost no one was doing it. And the people that were doing it did a more large scale situation. And I did not want to traffic in just lists and numbers. I wanted to do something more personal and had done some case management as well. So I decided to marry together that information-based model with a care management model and create something more personal to guide people through that process, which is how I landed on my tagline, which is walking with you through the journey, because everyone's journey is so unique. It is so very different. And I have really appreciated this business and the many wonderful families I've encountered and been able to guide them on their way. It's been such an honor, and it's led me to this point. And it's been a good last decade and a half.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, as I think about
Excuse me. Rescue dog.
this is the joys of LinkedIn Live. We get to meet Fido.
Brand new rescue dog. I had her a week. She's a 14-year-old blind senior, and she was considered hopeless for finding an adoptive family. So forgive me. She's acclimating. I apologize, but she's part of my senior care program.
I was going to say senior dogs, senior people. This is wonderful. I just think of how important, my great grandparents were in my life, and all of my grandparents. And I want to make sure, and I imagine that our listeners want to make sure that they're getting good care. They're not going to be in a facility where they're going to be mistreated or neglected, and we hear these stories. And so a lot of times we're reluctant to put our loved one in senior care. So I love the fact that you're helping people find suitable facilities and helping the younger generation honor their mother and their father and their grandparents, of course,
Yeah.
which is included in that. So I love what you're doing. So what is the difference between assisted living and care homes?
Interestingly, assisted living and care homes have the same licensure. They're both licensed by the Department of Social Services, Community Care Licensing, and they're governed by the law of Title 22. Vernacular speaking, we call the larger places assisted living communities, and we call the smaller places RCFEs or care homes, or even boarding care is a term that is used. But technically, under the law, they are all called RCFE. It stands for Residential Care for Elderly. But just the vernacular of the industry, we typically say assisted living are the large buildings, care homes are the small buildings. The care homes generally cater to 6 clients. That's what they're licensed for, is 6 clients. And they're in regular homes within neighborhoods. You wouldn't even know that they were a care home. But they have the exact same regulations as a large assisted living community. The administrators of both the large and the small have the same administrator certification. They both have the same CEUs. Their caregivers have to go through the same training and have the same CEUs. And one of the differences is in care homes, it's a more technically like a more supportive living environment. They are usually for people who have mid-stage to advanced dementia and or high physical frailty or even both. And they have memory care built in to their 6-bed community, whereas the larger assisted living communities, they may have no license for memory care. So the caregivers in the care homes have a natural component for cognitive care, memory care built in. The large assisted living communities may not be licensed for memory care. And if they do, they will have a separate area that is specifically, it's a secured area, is specifically for cognitive impairment. There are large buildings that are called standalone memory care environments, and they're considered a large building as well. So you can have assisted with a memory care component, you can have a standalone memory care building, or you can have a small 6-bed care home. Though there's a law that's coming up right now, they're trying to push through some changes in licensure to allow the care homes to go up to 12. So that would be forthcoming. But right now, most of our homes are designed like normal homes. And I want to say that they have this same license. They have to lock medications. They have to have points of egress. They have to have all of those, follow those same regulations as the large places. So it's great that we have different choices to meet the different needs.
Right. In my experience, which is limited, I've seen anything from a house in a residential community being converted to house, older people and have full-time caretakers coming in and out of the house where there's a kitchen and they cook in the kitchen and,
Exactly.
they have a TV room. But then I've seen, the more, I would say more commercialized, facilities with, like almost like a dormitory where they have a cafeteria bringing in the food and there'll be a lounge. And and then I'm seeing, situations where people are staying in their home. They're not even leaving the home and they're having people come to them.
Yes, there are a lot of different choices, and they're very individual for every person. So, like for instance, I would say in terms of what people need, as I mentioned, the care homes have that mid-stage or advanced memory impairment or high physical frailty or both. The assisted living community is better if a person is more independent, and particularly if they have no memory impairment, they can really maintain a lot of autonomy in those assisted living communities. One of the strengths of an assisted living community is their wonderful activities program, and they go on outings and they have parties and they have happy hour and they have their little bar lounge area and they have their own beauty parlor and they go see Pageant of the Masters, and it's terrific. Small care homes do not have that broad of an activities program. They do tend to do it more specialized, such as what do they love? Do they love bingo? Do they love karaoke? There's a lot of karaoke in care homes. There is also, as I say, a lot of cognitive impairment as well, and you have to be careful about overly saturating their senses, especially as you head toward the afternoon and evening. You want it to be calmer, and so there are very different options, and that's why assessment is so important to understand what their needs are and how to guide them.
Right. Right. And so what are placement services?
So I will let you, and also I wanted to give an acknowledgement to the in-home care companies. Of course, we all want to stay home as long as we possibly can. I think at a certain point, there needs to be evaluation, whereas people and families go through guilt over having their parents stay home. And so they want to keep them there. They also enter into isolation, and that they have determined in the last few years as a huge indicator of what can separate us from memory impairment is a lack of having close relationships, meaningful social relationships. And the more people get isolated and they're just there with one caregiver and that goes on for a long time, it's not great for the cognitive health of people. And I'm sorry, what was your question again?
That's okay. This is all LinkedIn Live. It's all coming.
I wanted to make sure I didn't put any shade on in-home care. I love in-home care, and I refer to it all the time when I have an assessment, and I realize that even financially, they really can't afford a care home or an assisted living community, but all they really need is a little help with bathing, dressing, setting up their pills, maybe taking them shopping. It's very simple, and they could just have a few
Making
hours
up the trash, making a meal, dusting the house, running the vacuum cleaner, that kind of stuff. Yeah, they're they're
Absolutely.
they're wonderful services, and I know that you and I know some of the people that are in that world.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So my question was, what are placement services?
Of course. So placement agents or referral agents, their primary goal is to help identify what the client needs. It's their care needs, their cognitive needs, their social needs, what their budget is, what the geography is of where they want to be, where family members live, who is like a primary caregiver. Do we want them to be around that particular person, or is there another sibling or other people involved? We want them kind of in a midpoint. We also want to identify barriers to care. If there's perhaps, sometimes there are situations that are much more tricky and complicated, like, for instance, an adult sibling who's living in the home and perceiving themselves as a caregiver for mom when really it's not really meeting her needs, and so we have to deal with that. So placement agents, and more particularly the smaller local agents, are more, they have more of a personal involvement, and the relationship can go on for sometimes like a couple of years, even, where you're just kind of a support basis for that family. But placement doesn't happen for a long time, and even when you develop those relationships, kindly, they even send their friends along. But this is just it can be a very long process, and there eventually it will land in a placement or not. But you really get close to your families, and you end up not only helping them, but sometimes their friends or other family members. So that in terms of, there are actually it's handled pretty differently. So there are local people who know the care homes well. They have long-time relationships with the administrators and the buildings, and they go to events at the buildings, and they stay up on what's going on. And then there are the larger type of referral companies, which are more national based. Mm-hmm. So their services are very different. One good thing about a large national service is you can call an 800 number and say, I need something in Texas, I need something in Washington, I need something in Arizona. And because they have a list of licensed homes and communities, they can provide a list. The downside of that is that their model allows for the communities all to call the family to figure out if the family is a good match. Whereas the local agents look at all of their contacts, and they're interviewing on their behalf and selecting maybe the best four, knowing that there's availability, the price is right, the social cognitive needs can be met, and a lot of qualifiers go into that short list for the family. And in case I forget to say it, placement services are no cost. They're no cost to the families.
I'll ask that.
Should I finish answering that one? So I will say that it's generally it's a no cost service to the families, and the placement agents are able to work with all of the care homes, assisted living communities, memory care communities, and even the independent living, and even the entrance fee communities where you put out a few $100,000 and they return a few. There's a very few of those, but they're able to work with all of them. And they enter into contracts where, like, for instance, my care homes, I usually have 60-day contracts unless it's hospice. Then I have a 120-day contract, and they have to go through that process. And outside of hospice, we do a 4-month contract because of the frailty of the situation, and we want to make sure that the person stays. In terms of just a regular care home placement, it is a 30 and 60-day contract, usually 60. And after that person has chosen a place, they've moved in, they are successful there and considered a successful placement, that is when the care home would owe you a fee for bringing a successful placement. So the goal is for the family to be happy and well served, for the community to receive a successful client, and then everybody wins. And that's how the remuneration happens.
What I love about that is you don't just get paid to put someone in any old place. You really have to do your due diligence to figure out what that person needs and what they're able to do cost wise. And you're only paid if it's successful. So I love that.
So my goal is to bring them a list that they love, that they will choose a place from that list and that they will move in and be successful. So that's a high motivation. But what I love is that I'm not selling anything. I'm not representing anybody. I can use any one of the 1,300 places. Like Orange County alone is 1,300 places. And I do work in the surrounding areas, but I don't refer in other states, or I work in my surrounding counties as well, but only places that I can drive to and interact with and create relationships with. And if a person, I often am contacted by people that need to find a place outside of my area, and I have a conversation with them how to ascertain that type of a connection.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Maybe some of our listeners are in, New Jersey or Arizona or somewhere else outside of your area where they can find someone that's as awesome as you are.
Thank you. You're kind. I will tell you exactly what I tell folks under that circumstance. I tell them to reach out to their local Alzheimer's Association or Office on Aging or Caregiver Resource Center and tell them that personally, because I appreciate this model of the local agent, I would suggest that you ask for a local agent, someone who lives and works in the area, a local agent. That is what I would ask for, and that's what I would ask for, and that is where I would go. So you need to look at your basic, your mainline agencies. So again, that would be like the Office on Aging, the Caregiver Resource Center, and the Alzheimer's Association. You should have some local offices, and they will absolutely have resources for you, as well as other resources, not just placement, but they can do like Meals on Wheels and friendly visitors. And there's even some hours of in-home care that can be offered by the county if you're qualified. And a lot of people are qualified. So if you want just a few hours of care, it's called in-home support services, and that's free if you can qualify for it. So they have lots of great resources, and even caregivers, you're not in this alone. There are a lot of people who are struggling and want support, people who understand, people who can make suggestions. And so there are all kinds of support groups for people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and a myriad of other issues. Just simply being a caregiver yourself, and you want that support, a point of connection, and resources. All of those local agencies are very helpful.
Well, let me ask you this. We need to wrap this up. Who pays for the long-term care?
Historically, it has been private pay. So people would use their Social Security, their savings, their pensions. Some people are fortunate to have long-term care insurance policies. Oftentimes people will sell their house and they will invest the money from their house.
Won't pay this?
This is usually private pay, but there is, like, for instance, in California, there is a program called the Assisted Living Waiver Program. And just for instance, you would have to have Medicare, Medi-Cal, and no share of cost, just for starters, in terms of qualifying. And that's about a year to a year and a half wait for that. So that is something that can be done. But most people are not going to qualify for that. And so it is mostly people are paying with their own funds, private pay.
Right. And which is why, I'm talking with so many clients these days, who are, 50 and older, saying, hey, you really need to consider a long-term care, because it could be, a major financial event to have one spouse in long-term care and the other at home. Or to have them both in long-term care. I mean, it could double your expenses at the end of your life. And as healthcare continues to improve, and that's a wonderful thing, we're living longer. But what we're also seeing is that the end of our lives, it's a little bit more volatile. Our lives, medically speaking, we're having a little bit of a longer downturn, where we're lasting a little bit longer than we would have in the past. And so I think that what's going to happen is, that those stats of women living in long-term care 3.5 years, men a little less than 2, I think that's just going to continue to increase, which means that the cost is, as it goes up, they're going to have to pay more for a longer period of time. So having that long-term care insurance policy might be really important. And what I've always told you, Teresa, is that, hey, the kids of your clients should really be talking to their advisor about how to plan for that long-term care event.
Yes,
Because your clients are 80 or older, and their kids are going to be, 50 to 60, on average.
yes. And I do want to give a little bit of encouragement. There is a very broad spectrum of price points and
Yeah.
options. So we're talking everything from a shared room in a care home, which is by law, both the small care home and the large assisted community and memory care. It's all 24-hour care and supervision. But you can go from a shared room at a care home. And if you have good care in a clean home, but it's in maybe a lower cost community, like a lower land value community, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't even find a very nice home, but you're looking for good care, a clean environment. But you find maybe houses that are on maybe a little bit busier of a street, or maybe older furnishing. So you can go all the way from a shared room in that environment, which is good care, all the way up to very fancy, Corona Del Mar, Newport Beach, suites, of memory care. So you can go all the way from 44,000, 4,500, all the way up to $17,000. And there's
Yeah.
every point in between. So there's usually an answer for most people.
Personally, if I ever need long-term care, I hope there's a facility in Yosemite Valley, because then I'll go there.
That sounds lovely. We'll look
Teresa,
that up for you.
yeah.
We'll be ready.
So thank you so much for coming on today. This has been wonderful. And how can our listeners or people viewing this reach out to you?
Sure. You can take a look at my website if you'd like and connect through there. My website is called Trusted Senior Placement, trustedseniorplacement.com. You can look it up on my website and get in touch with me. And if all else fails, you can always go through Keith, and he's a wonderful friend, and I'm sure he can direct you right to me.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much for viewing our LinkedIn Live today. As always, we know you love your family, and we know that money is a tool, and we're here to help you use your money to serve your family and to serve others, and to love God. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.